So I'd like to say hello to everyone and thank you all for attending our second session of this fall program for the Virtual Inter-University Symposium on Infrastructure Management. So today we have Priyadarshan Patil and Aaron Chow presenting their work. So each presentation should be about 20 minutes, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for questions from the audience. So just feel free to jump in at any point in that time of that Q&A time and just ask a question. I'd also like to point out that the meeting is being recorded and we'll be publishing the recording shortly after, as we have done with all the ones in the past. And again, thank you all for attending. So to introduce our first speaker, Priyadarshan Patil is an operations research scientist at Electrotempo, working on fleet electrification. He has a PhD in operations research from the University of Texas at Austin, focusing on traffic assignment models and solution algorithms. His research focuses on network optimization, electrification, clean energy, and resilience. And so with this, I'd like to hand it over to Priyadarshan. Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian. All right. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to spend some time with you all today and talk about medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification. So basically trucks, buses, and some of the challenges that come with it. So as of today, when we talk about freight electrification, when you think about it, there are fleets who are thinking about wanting to electrify. They go to their utility companies and ask for an electric hookup. Utility companies are like, we need to upgrade our substations or feeder lines because we don't necessarily have the supply for medium heavy duty vehicles. So then they go to their regulators and then they ask, hey, can we have approvals and fundings to upgrade our infrastructure? And then the regulators are like, well, where is your money coming from? What's the legislation at? And so if you think about it, the key drivers are essentially changes in legislation that's driving down to regulators, utilities, and their customers. And in this process, there's a back and forth at each step. And there are a lot of challenges where each of these entities or stakeholders are trying to understand what exactly is it that they need to do to electrify or help the process of electrification. What are some of the unique challenges that each of these stakeholders are tackling? And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is where can research actually pitch in and help, or like what are some of the key challenges that research can actually help with? So as I said, with the current status, legislature is the key driver. A couple of examples of very prescriptive legislation are the Inflation Reduction Act and Advanced Clean Trucking Rule. So why do I say this is prescriptive? It's because, for example, the Advanced Clean Truck Rule specifically says by 2024, all of the new drayage truck purchases in California have to be electric. By 2028 or by 2029, 50% of all tractor trailer purchases have to be electric, and so on. So it is very highly prescriptive and no longer a vague goal of, oh, we want to electrify sometime in the future. And so that is essentially driving all fleet owners to think about when they need to replace their equipment and when and how they are going to do it. So as I said, we have three key stakeholders here. The first is on the demand side, that's the fleet owners. The second is on the electricity supply side, that's the utility companies. And the third is infrastructure site owners. And when I say site owners, I'm talking about commercial real estate owners who want to put in chargers or warehouses, storage facilities where these fleets tend to make stops and they need charging facilities. So these are the three key stakeholders, and I will go through them one by one, give you an example of a case study or a customer that we are working with and what we have done for them or some of the interesting findings or insights from them. So the first, as I said, is fleet owners. The burning question that they have is, how do I electrify my fleet? If I'm serving some routes or if I have some shift schedules, which vehicles do I electrify first? What will be my cost of electrification or my total cost of ownership? What's my break-even horizon or financial metrics? And essentially, what do I need to do to figure out my expenses? So some insights about these kind of customers. There are two key kinds of fleet owners. The first is on-roads. So on-road vehicles that are like tractor trailers. These serve long routes or like box trucks that are serving neighborhoods. they need to fulfill route obligations. And off-road vehicles are things such as, say, forklifts, utility tractors, things that usually work at a yard or at a terminal or at an airport where they are on a schedule. They don't necessarily serve routes, but they're on a schedule. So the key difference between these two is the availability of electric equipment today. As y'all may have heard, for long-range trucks, the Tesla Semi is kind of the only one in the market today with a range about like 250 miles, whereas diesel trucks, routinely do more than 500 miles a day. But for off-road vehicles such as forklifts, UTRs, because the battery requirements are much lower, there's a larger selection of electric equipment available today. And so the next question that some of these owners have is, will we have enough supply from the utility? Because when you're looking at fleets of like 200, 250, 300 vehicles, then you're looking at electricity supply of like 2 megawatts, 4 megawatts, 6 megawatts. And a lot of utility companies are unable to provide this supply. And one question that I won't cover, but companies are asking is, will battery storage help with any of this? So let's take a look at a port that we are working with on the East Coast. So this port has 6 terminals, each with 3 or 4 cost centers. So think about it as something like the rail yard, the dockyard, the cranes, and so on. So each has a mix of vehicles, as I said, forklifts, pickup trucks, utility tractors, and each of these cost centers have multiple of these vehicles with different shift schedules that they're serving and vehicle needs. The question that the port was trying to answer was, if we electrify all of it, what is our optimal operational schedule? What is our optimal cost? And how do we go about it? So to dive into, as I said, with nuances, utility rates vary by time. So you don't want to charge everything at the same hour. Utility rates also have a peak power demand component. So if you want to spread out your demand, it'll cost less. If you have a huge peak where you're charging things simultaneously, your utility rates will spike. Now, talking about the optimization formulation at a specific cost center, we are looking at like minimizing capex and opex over a 10 or 12-year horizon, because that's the average lifetime of a vehicle. Capex is vehicle purchase cost, charger purchase cost, charger installation cost, or any kind of equipment that needs to be installed to support these chargers. And OPEX is your energy charge, power demand charge, vehicle maintenance cost, and charger maintenance costs. These are some of the constraints. I didn't type out the math, but they want their vehicles to remain within a specified range of charge, or they must charge according to charger charge rates. Vehicles can either be in use, charging, or idle, and can only charge at one charger. Chargers can supply up to their maximum rating, and a few others. Now, where is the complexity? It seems like a straightforward optimization problem. You're just trying to do some vehicle sizing and charger sizing. So for a single terminal, it's pretty easy. However, the complexity comes from having to co-optimize for all the cost centers with their different schedules, with their different charging schedules, with their different requirements. So that is where traditional solvers, or just throwing a linear program at a traditional solver for all of these cost center fails. That is where we have to use techniques such as relaxations for some of the constraints and trying to look at reducing problem sizes or reformulations. Now, similarly, for on-road vehicles, trucks serve routes that are of varying length and have some time windows for their customers. And we kind of need to identify key routes that can be electrified. Currently, as I said, with the availability of equipment, it's pretty easy, because the only routes that we can electrify are driven by legislation and driven by availability of equipment. But as more and more equipment becomes available for on-road vehicles, then it will become a more interesting optimization problem. Now, moving on to our second type of customers, or our second key stakeholder, that's the utility companies. Utility companies are the providers of electricity, and they have 2 main priorities. One, keep the grid stable and healthy. And the second is provide electricity, in that order. They want to care about the grid. If they cannot supply energy in order to keep the grid healthy, that is completely fine. So they need to identify where exactly is the demand originating so that they can target infrastructure accordingly. And yeah, as I said, this is the overview that I just talked about. So far, utility companies are very familiar with people and buildings. They look at a building, they look at the square footage, type of usage, and they can say, oh, this is an office building with a square footage of whatever, 5,000 square feet. It means there will be X number of people there, and the electricity usage will be Y with a temporal distribution XYZ. But this is the first time that they are encountering fleet vehicles, and they need to understand what exactly is the behavior of these fleet vehicles, what are the kind of temporal distribution of the charging demand of these vehicles, what is the quantity of charge that these vehicles will need, and where exactly are they located, or how are they associated with their infrastructure. So we'll look at another quick case study of a utility company that we have worked with in New York and Massachusetts. So they wanted to identify all medium and heavy duty demand depots in their service region. So when I say a depot, I mean a place where a vehicle will charge. Oftentimes, and I will talk about this in the complexity section, oftentimes vehicles are registered to a business owner's home address or wherever the business is registered, but they may be parked elsewhere at a different location and charging elsewhere. And that makes it a little tough to identify which electric infrastructure or which feeder line, which substation that vehicle is drawing from. So, and the other nuance is that any infrastructure upgrade costs are amortized over 15, 20 years and are passed to customers. So if they have to put in a substation today, the costs are customers are going to be paying for it for the next 25 years. And in 5 years, if they realize that it's not enough to meet the demand, they have to tear it down, put a new one, and that doesn't mean that the old costs go away. Now the customers have to pay double the costs. So therefore, the utilities are very concerned with accurate identification of demand. Now, for this utility and to identify these medium heavy duty vehicles, we combine various data sets to identify MHD, medium heavy duty vehicle locations. And then we use satellite data for verification to address the specific issue that I mentioned of vehicles being parked elsewhere. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but some of the sample sources that we used and merged to obtain the depot list was the property data, vehicle registration data, like commercial fleet data, locations of a lot of these Amazon fulfillment centers, Walmart fulfillment centers, or any major retailer fulfillment centers, major transit facilities such as New York Transit Authority, Massachusetts Transit Authority, and so on and so forth. Once these were merged, then we used satellite data for verification, and then we created a classification model to predict with a confidence or what is the probability of each of these parcels or locations being a depot. After that, we actually sampled. We actually did a stratified sampling through the depot list and then identified which depots or which factors were actually affecting things to be a depot or which weren't. So I just wanted to give you all an example of what a depot map looked like. So if you look on the screen here, all of the orange dots, red dots are depots which have a specific power demand. They are color coded. So for a given time of day and year, what is the energy demand or power demand that is being pulled from that depot? Now, there's a slight logical jump that I made here between, oh, we have a list of depots, and now, oh, suddenly we have the energy usage at a depot. Now, this jump is bridged by essentially looking at the type of depot, what kind of business is it, what are typical travel patterns for these kind of depots, and using historical transportation insights from like IT TripGen and other transportation databases to identify what kind of charging behavior would be present at each depot. Now, the utility has a depot map. They understand what is the temporal distribution of the energy. Where is the complexity? As I've talked about the first point, the second point is verifying the actual fleet sizes. other than going door to door and asking, hey, how many vehicles do you have? Some of the other the other easier methods are going by the number of parking spots, going by the number of vehicles present across different snapshot of Google Earth or Google Maps. I apologize. And so on. And then being able to accurately predict the usage and charging patterns. So that gives the utilities information about the demand side of things. Then we help them overlay their infrastructure. So the lines that you see here are their feeder lines. And then we aggregate the demand of all the depots around the feeder line to the feeder line. So they can see from medium and heavy duty vehicles, what is the pull on any specific feeder line. That way, utility companies know, okay, the capacity of this specific feeder line is X megawatts, and the pull is Y. Is Y greater than X? Well, then you're in trouble and we need to upgrade. If not, they understand what's the spacing or safety net that they have. So this is one way of helping utilities understand where the demand is in their region and helping them walk through it. And the last type of customer or stakeholder that I mentioned is site owners. And the biggest question that they have is, where can I install chargers? Think of it as an analog to gas stations, where gas station companies like Shell, BP are like, well, where do we put in gas stations so that we can get maximum demand? And so site owners just want to do that for electric chargers. Now, think of this as companies like Prologis, Americold, who are massive commercial real estate owners. They have clients like Amazon, Walmart, or even smaller retailers who have trucks. And these retailers are asking, well, if you want to electrify our fleet, can you provide us chargers? And so these companies want to install chargers. Now, at this point, I think you may be noticing a common theme here. All of these businesses have a lot of information about their domain, but they do not understand transportation. They do not understand traffic patterns. They do not understand what kind of traffic is around them or where is this demand located. And this is the same with this kind of client. So they have two types of traffic: highway traffic, which is trucks that are passing through and stopping by. And they have local traffic that are box trucks serving the local area. Think of it as like Amazon vans, think of it as like Cortland furniture vans, and so on and so forth. Now, as I said, these clients have their own advanced analytics, but they don't understand traffic patterns. And the other thing is they have never had to deal with utility supplies. Can we get a 5 megawatt hookup? Oh, it'll take 3 years. What are you talking about? So these are things that they've never dealt with. So these are the kind of nuances that these customers are facing. And when they're starting off, they want to think about subscription model for their customers so that they can guarantee some revenue, but they don't necessarily know what their forecasts will be. Now, the methodology for predicting highway flows, and I'll go over this very quickly, was developed for the Department of Energy by our CEO. And we estimate traffic flows, basically highway flows and arrival patterns based on freight data and trip types. And then local demand profiles are derived from the type of depots around any given site and historical traffic information. So let me just show you, this is one example of how we provide our customers what kind of travel profiles that we have. So for straight trucks, that is highway traffic, you see traffic at this specific site spiking between, say, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Whereas for for tractor trailers, the traffic is kind of spread throughout the day, and then that's how the activity is spread. We also help them predict the number of EV arrivals based on assumptions like capture rate and so on and so forth. So then we can translate that into energy results, such as what is the power demand profile, what is the local utility threshold, and then what's the energy demand that they have. Once they understand this, they understand that putting in, say, 500 kilowatt chargers, they need to put in 4 of them because the demand is 1800. So in order to meet it, and then they can calculate utilization and other financial metrics. So in conclusion, based on what we have seen, electrification is basically currently being driven by legislation, which then goes down to utilities, which then goes down to infrastructure, that is site owners, and then it goes down to fleet owners. Whereas the pull is being driven on the other side in the reverse. That is, fleet owners are asking infrastructure owners, who are asking utilities, and who are asking legislation. Now, all of these stakeholders, these are Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies in many cases. They know their business, but this is the time when they need to understand traffic or insights about traffic. And there are lots of opportunities for using this traffic data and creative problem solving with just, our existing transportation engineering methods. So with that, I'll stop and take questions.
Thank you, Priyadarshan. Very interesting. Any questions from the audience? I have a question. I can start off, and then
yeah.
So super interesting, and I really appreciate like the large picture methodology of looking at the three kinds of primary stakeholders in this very complex issue. So I guess I had a question on the fleet owner perspective, and with concerns about rate of innovation. So a reasonable concern for a fleet owner might be, should I invest in vehicles now and lock myself into a 12-year
amortization plan,
and technology that is right now, or should I wait 1 more year, 2 more years for a technology that will be maybe 2 times better, have 2 times more storage than, or be 2 times cheaper, right? Just any kind of improvement could happen, in a very short period of time in this like highly changing space. So what are some methods that you might consider or are considering to answer this question? How would you answer this kind of question for a fleet owner, I guess?
Yeah, so one of the biggest concerns or one of the biggest drivers for this is the prescriptive legislation. Like California says, any new drayage trucks being purchased from January 1st, 2024 have to be electric. So in a lot of cases, the prescriptive legislation helps us out because we have to tell the customer, yeah, if you are planning, you have to buy new stuff. The other limiting factor that these companies are seeing for these kind of purchases is the long waiting times. Like Tesla Semi, for example, took registrations or reservations like 2 years ago, and this is the first year that they've delivered some to Pepsi. Other companies took in reservations like 1.5 years ago and are starting deliveries now. So for a lot of these companies, when they are planning, they do it in a staggered manner. They're like, we'll at least start off with what's there, we'll put in orders, and then in 1.5 years or 2 years, we'll reassess the financial feasibility, we'll redo our financial or economic analysis, and then see what our rate of return looks like.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Priya. This was a very nice talk. So a question that I have, it's something that you teased us with, but you didn't quite get into, is how can you manage these electric fleets a little better in the scenarios that we have now? Like in California, I think that depending on the season, sometimes we have I don't know if I think they're called brownouts, essentially when like kind of the power requirements are very close to the installed capacity. And so you talked a little bit about using batteries to manage essentially the loads. So I think this is interesting also, like potentially, I don't know, like kind of shipping charge batteries, say by rail or something like that. But I don't know if you have some ideas about how to manage these loads in the event of these capacitated energy generation.
Yeah, absolutely, Pablo. And that is exactly where the DER, or distributed energy resources, came in. With ICE vehicles, a lot of these fleets have like diesel tanks or diesel pumps at their own locations, so that even if they can't get diesel anywhere, they're okay with it. In the next couple of years, like currently and in the next couple of years. A lot of these companies are working on purchasing on-site generation up to like 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts. Interestingly enough, they call it a grid on a skid. That's the slang for it. So they are trying to purchase some generation resources on site, mainly in the case of blackouts, brownouts, or them being unable to get power from the grid. Because for all of these companies, their biggest concern is being able to get work done. And if they can't get energy from the grid, they are not going to be able to.
These are emergency and so likely also not renewable energy generation.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of these grid on the skids are using either like hydrogen or diesel as their key fuel. So that's the first safety buffer that companies are going with. The other safety buffer that companies are going with is essentially being able to start off their own battery storage, or like swapping batteries out, that kind of stuff. The problem there is a lot of this kind of battery storage for like say 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt level of demand is incredibly expensive, say $200,000, $300,000. And so that is not a preferred way at the current price point.
Priya, thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. I was just very curious about what the demand of electricity is for electric vehicles of this sort compared to, for example, the same infrastructure like that is in the neighborhood. For example, the residential the demand. What are we talking about in terms of relative demand?
Yeah, so if you like going into averages, if you look at tractor trailers, like the trucks that you see on highways, they an average trip would take about 350 400 kilowatts of energy. If you're talking about smaller trucks like Amazon delivery vehicles like Rivians, or smaller local trucks, they are expected to take around 150 kilowatts or so. Compared to that, like regular Tesla Model X, Model Y batteries are like 100 kilowatts or less. So in terms of just pure traffic numbers, you're looking at anywhere between 2 to 4 times that of passenger vehicles per vehicle. Compared to residential usage, again, this is slightly like an order of magnitude higher than like a singular household.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. All right.
Any other questions before we transition over? Okay. Well, thank you again, Priyadarshan. If there are any more questions, we can circle back after Aaron's presentation. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with this, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Aaron Chow is a research scientist with the Transportation Infrastructure Management Lab under the engineering division at NYU Abu Dhabi. And previously he worked as a postdoctoral associate at MIT Civil and Environmental Engineering, focusing on the transport and dispersion of excess salinity in coastal discharges from desalination plants in Kuwait. Before this, he worked as an environmental consultant at Gradient and Berkeley Research Group in Boston, Massachusetts. With this, I'll hand it over to our speaker, Aaron.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Thank you for inviting me to for this talk. The title of the talk here is The Coastal Protection Strategies to Minimize Transportation Network Disruption from Sea Level Rise, using the case study of Abu Dhabi. I want to just say that I am of a hydrodynamics background, so I am more in tune with the tidal model that I will explain in more detail. However, Ilya Papakonstantinou was really the main traffic modeler in this study. Just to go on, So although we don't really know the extent of the sea level rise, most climatologists will expect a very significant 3 to 7 feet of sea level rise on a global average in the next 100 years or so. And if you look on this map here, or this image here, the observed trend is already about 2 feet, being extrapolated to about 2010 to 2100. And we're really expecting sort of even higher than that, because sea level rise have been even faster than the observed these intermediate high is the current trend. With sea level, with this, the prevalence of what we call a nuisance or sunny day flooding is going to happen, whereby even without the storms, you see sort of the high tide going into the coastal areas, and this is going to happen quite a lot more in the foreseeable future. So sea level rise and the coastal infrastructure is the most vulnerable, and there's obviously a lot of disturbance of operation and damages, public buildings and such, and causing tens or hundreds of millions of dollars of property damage. And then also for transportation, what happens is that the coastal links will get inundated. Then you have capacity and accessibility reduction, causing significant delays. And these are amplified well inland of a lot of these coastal areas as well. So our approach really is combining sort of my expertise, which is hydrodynamics modeling of the coastal inundation, and then we couple that with ILIA's transportation network adaptation using route choice model, and then we come up with sort of useful objectives for sort of urban planning, just seeing what flooded links will cause in terms of traffic delay, and we want to minimize those in terms of how to protect the coastal areas to minimize traffic delay, also minimize traffic distance, and also increase the max accessibility of the commuters. The case study, as I mentioned, was Abu Dhabi. Most of the city is lower than 5 meters above mean sea level, and it's consisting of a system of islands. We see it on the map here on the right. And what we do is, this is the main island here is Abu Dhabi city. The airport is on the mainland, and the university is in this island. So there's a lot of a lot of infrastructure scattered throughout islands. What we decided to do is to split the coastline into various precincts that we can, based on a 2030 Abu Dhabi urban structure framework plan. And so then we assume that we're going to build levees or some kind of seawall to protect any flooding in each of these precincts. And we see how each precinct protection affects the other. And so now, from now on, we say, if I say P01, it means that precinct 1 here is the one that's protected. So our process now is we're using different hydrodynamic simulations results. We look at what kind of inundation of links will happen for given different types of protection scenarios of different precincts, which ones are inundated. That reduces the network that we have in the traffic model, that then changes the traffic assignment and in the route choice model. And so now the aim is to identify the combinations of precincts that, when protected, lead to like lower congestion levels and also maximize accessibility of the traffic network. I'm going to explain what my contribution is, the coastal hydrodynamics model. So how do I figure out the peak flooding water level? It's the sum of 3 different models, actually. The first one is the tidal water levels, which is a Gulf-wide hydrodynamics model that is forced from the oceanographic and climate change data, mainly water level. Then the second is the storm surge, which is used. It's called surface waves near shore model, SWAN, and then finally, you see here the storm surge will add to the tidal level, and then the wave run up as the waves crash onto the shoreline, you have a larger an increased wave run up. Then this is the sort of the maximum extent of your water, and that those combined effects give you the peak water level. And as I mentioned earlier, the tidal model is what you see on the left-hand figure, which is showing you the whole of the Persian Gulf. You see here is the Gulf of Oman, where I'm pointing with my mouse. And this is where we force using a TPXO, which is a tidal atlas, which is a tide that's available throughout the world as a global database. However, what we do is we add 0.5 meters of sea level rise to this. 0.5 meters sea level rise is kind of the intermediate level of the RCP 8.5 sea level rise that may happen between, I would say, 2050 to 2080, something like that. So that's 0.5. It's pretty it's in the well within the observed trend of what will happen. So we put this 0.5 meters up here. Excuse me. Okay. Now here in the Persian Gulf, we experience winds that are very long and sustained during the winter, and they kind of blow down from Iraq and Kuwait down towards. Oh, sorry. Blow towards the UAE coast, which is here, and this, because of the very long kind of distance traveled, there's a long fetch. There's a high waves get formed over a sustained period of time during the winter. They call these the Shamal events. And this happens during the winter. So what we've chosen is to model the tidal model plus this high wind event that causes sort of high waves. And so these two models are sort of coupled together, as you can see on the right. And then what happens is we get peak water levels, and then we compare that to the sorry, we get the peak water levels, and we compare that with the land elevation to see which areas are flooded. Like I said here, overlay the water levels with the topography and compare the peak water levels to figure out where the inundation is happening. And what happens is I pass this on to Ilya, who then sorry. The traffic simulation, what she does is remove from the network the roads that are flooded, then use the reduced network for the input for the traffic simulation. We are fortunate to have a model that is used by the government here in Abu Dhabi, and it's called STEAM. It's based on Cube, regional stress simulator. It actually takes a transportation network that is anticipated in 2040. So we are using future transport network data. It also has other changes in land use and other strategic decisions sort of coded in the future. So we're not using like past data we're using sort of projected data for the sea level rise as well as the projected transportation network. As I mentioned, the different mobility metric that we want, network-wide values is VHT, the VKT, VHT vehicles, very useful. Volume to capacity ratio is very useful to visualize congestion along the individual streets. Sorry. And then to quantify accessibility, we use the number of vehicles in the network. Sometimes in the case of very long commutes, the commuters won't even take the trip. So then they're removed from the network. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you some traffic model simulation. But before that, an interesting hydrodynamic impact is that actually if you protect the precincts, put walls around one precinct, if you go back to The map earlier, there are like many islands which are kind of abut each other, and protecting one actually may harm the others. For example, the protection of precinct 1 actually will increase the inundated area of its neighboring precinct by 22%. So there are some different, there are some sort of interactions that are quite interesting to see hydrodynamically speaking. Now, so there is that sort of clear dynamic effect of protecting the different precincts, but that's not the case for the traffic, because you really have to look at sort of protection of different combinations of precincts, because it really has an effect on what kind of traffic network corridors are affected by each protection scenario. With that, I'm going to show the traffic network modeling. So here on the left-hand side, you see this is the Abu Dhabi without any seawalls or protection. And this is with the 0.5 sea level rise. And these are the peak water levels that are being plotted from the hydrodynamic simulation overlaid onto the traffic network. As you can see, you have a lot of flooded areas. Black links suggest that these links are going to be underwater. Red links are not underwater, however, they are highly congested. So that's what you see here. The white are links that are still existent and are running. And on the right-hand side, we have the case of everything being protected. All of the links here, there are no black links. However, there's just a general congestion that you may observe during the commute. This is a morning commute. Okay, so because here you see all bridges between the different islands are operative on the right-hand side, whereas that's not the case on the left-hand side. Even in the case of all protection, you have this bridge, which is the Sheikh Zayed bridge, which is here. It's it really does it's red in any case. In the left-hand side, you have links flooded or isolated, which is in black. Much smaller network in figure 8, the left than the right, as I described. The number of vehicles on the left decreases by about 30%. But the network VHD is higher because you've got a lot of rerouting and congestion. And of course, because of that, VHD per vehicle is more than 70% higher in the case of no protection. Of course, the all on the right-hand side is the best case, but it's expensive to be protecting the whole the entire city. So we're trying to figure out sort of a subset of protection strategies that give us sort of most bang of the buck. That's what I'm saying here. There are a few that we tried different combinations, but just for the for sake of time, we'll just present a few that are important and illustrative. This one, for example. This one is counterintuitive because we're protecting, we're resuming flow. We're zooming into this particular case where we're protecting these two islands. Although the traffic here is resumed, what happens is that we've decided we've only have one bridge connecting downtown to the mainland, which is here. And now what now these people have to do on this island is to make a massive detour around just to get into the downtown area. So, and what happens is sorry. Here, yes. So this is an example where protecting this highway is and the access to the mainland here will cause the entire network to experience congestion because you have a huge detour and you're worsening the bottleneck in this bridge. Then, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to show you sort of the one that causes the best scenario, which is the one here, F. In this case, what we've done is this particular scenario with these particular precincts protected causes 3 and 4 different bridges to be able to be restored. And what this does is then it reduces the bottleneck, and it reduces the vehicle hours per vehicle all the way back to almost restored back to the level with everything protected. However, what happens, however, in the previous case is that yes, you have a lot of vehicles that the vehicles traveled per vehicle hours traveled per vehicle is the lowest out of all the different protection scenarios. However, it's because a lot of the cars are still not back on the network. And in order to make that occur, this is the scenario that we want to use. This is protecting this corridor, the northern corridor that travels between these islands to the north of the Abu Dhabi island, as well as restoring these links to the mainland. What this does is there is a decrease in VHT per vehicle, almost down to the case that I showed previously. However, there's a huge improvement. Here I talk about the change in vehicles from the worst to the best. That's from the left to the right here. So the smaller the bar, the better it is. It's closer to the all protected scenario. And this particular protection strategy restores the most number of cars in the network. So a lot more commuters are able to travel again. And so conclusions from this study is that it is really critical to protect the approaches to the bridges, to really minimize all these bottlenecks between the island and the mainland. And yeah, that's we really don't want any. We just really want to minimize the bottlenecks. Really, is the main conclusion. We're extending this with the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Infrastructure are interested in extending this to the federal level. So now this could be more. This can be applied also to the road network of Dubai and other parts of the UAE. So that's it for me. Thanks very much for your. This is just a hydrodynamic. It's a simulation of how sort of the tides can sort of inundate the coastline of Dubai. Thank you, and with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Aaron. Very interesting presentation. Are there any questions from the audience at this point? Ordner?
Yep.
Hi.
Yep, please.
Can you hear me well?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. One thing I'm curious about is the flood walls that you talk about, the protection schemes. I'm curious to know if you ever compare the construction costs of these protection schemes and compare that with the benefits of protecting for the traffic, and if you find any sort of ranking of the different schemes that you have presented.
No, thank you for that. That's a very good question. We haven't yet, because we are trying to sort of do a sort of unit cost of the seawall, and right now we're really just doing some more modeling to see, you know, how high these walls have to be, and that really does have a big impact on what the cost will be for these. You know, at the moment, these sea walls are sort of assumed ideal and impenetrable, but of course that may not be the case if you're building a wall that's like 5 meters or 3 to 5 meters. You know, they may be overtopping, and so that's sort of why we haven't really made that comparison to sort of cost versus benefit. But that's important. That's very important. Thank you very much for that question.
Yeah, thanks for answering.
Oh, and I have another question. First of all, thank you for your presentation. That was very interesting. And it seems that, like, from the graph that you showed, the bridges connecting to the islands are the bottleneck of the whole traffic network if there's flooded. So I wonder if there's a comparison between like building more new bridges with like protecting the shoreline. Is that so like why people didn't consider like building more bridges like
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Yeah, the Abu Dhabi Department of Transportation, if you look closer on this map here, I don't know if you can see. Where is the better map? Yeah, okay, this is a good map. If you look on the right-hand side, there's actually already 3 bridges almost trying to be redundant with each other. And one was sort of the original bridge, and now they've built 2 more to sort of alleviate this this bottleneck. And also one of them was sort of lower elevation, and some of these other bridges are higher elevation. You also see here, this is another sort of newly planned bridge, which doesn't exist right now. It's going to be built. So they have started some of this, but we're sort of, our modeling here is sort of, we're anticipating that these might not be enough. Yeah. And so you are correct. I mean, we have to really use this sort of future modeling scenario just to inform the planners that, you know, you may need more bridges, much more importance on protecting the bridges and their approaches. Does that answer your question?
yeah, thank you.
So I had a question. Thank you for the presentation again. I thought it was, you know, very interesting, and I know that you're more of a, you know, hydrology person, but I wonder if you have any ideas as to what, looking at the impacts of these different scenarios on either pedestrian activity or transit might look like. So I don't know what the transit system in Abu Dhabi is, and I also don't know what the pedestrian areas are, but I wonder, you know, what this analysis might look like there.
No, thanks for that. Yeah, I didn't really explain clearly enough, I guess, because Abu Dhabi, there's minimal metro network. There isn't one. We're just relying on buses. And people will really only walk around for about 3 months in a year, like the winter months, because the rest of the time it's over 100 degrees. We're talking about 120, you know, and like, you know, it's like walking 5 to 10 meters you're gonna break a sweat just walking out to your car. So I would say that pedestrian zones, yes, there are up in the Corniche area, which is up here, which I can see here. This is sort of a very scenic area that people can walk in, but only for 3 months in a year. But this is a very interesting question when we, for example, go and extend this analysis to Dubai, which does have a metro system. So no, this is very good questioning. And I think it's more applicable to Dubai than Abu Dhabi.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also had a question. Interesting presentation. Thank you for that. My question was, you have different levels of water, and it might be possible that the roads are flooded at different level, right? So maybe
Yes.
heavy vehicles like buses could go on, but it can be
Mm,
closed for may small vehicles, I guess, cars, right? So
yes.
that way, I think like the traffic would still be rerouted in some sense, so it might not be
Yes.
closed entirely. So do you model that, or is it like 0-1 right now?
Right now it is 0-1. I've seen other papers who have tried to adapt your approach, exactly what you said. What they said is, for example, cars are have a wheel, of diameter of 30, 30, the radius of 30 centimeters, let's say, a foot. Whereas the truck have a higher radius of for the wheels. And what they would then do is overlay and add, okay, well, we'll add a buffer of half a meter that, all vehicles can still traverse this flooded road. Right now, my analysis doesn't do that, but it is definitely something I've seen other people do. And so, yes, yeah, there is a way that it's been done. It just hasn't been done here.
Yeah, thanks for that info.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
I'll ask you one question, Aaron, which is very cool. Again, I echo what everybody said. Thank you for the interesting presentation and for agreeing to make the presentation in the first place. And so I think that essentially your overall conclusion about protecting the bottlenecks, I think, is important, right? However, I think that I wanted to ask if there were some perhaps unintuitive protection elements that you selected, probably based on the hydrodynamic analysis, that essentially would not be necessarily protect essentially the bridges, which are the bottlenecks and that sort of thing, but rather essentially where, due to interactions or other factors, that it was important to select a given strategy that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, no, very good question. Well, the one that we determined was quite E12 is a very big road that leads to Dubai, and so we had thought at first that protecting this one was very important. However, this was the one that caused a lot of it worsened the bottleneck here in this bridge to Sheikh Zayed Bridge. That was somewhat counterintuitive. The other one I haven't presented here, but the protection of this area, the P01, which is this it's a very big industrial area in Abu Dhabi. This then pushes the water and increases flooding in 2 and 3. So protecting this was made these two precincts worse. That's probably as much in terms of the hydrodynamics that were causing some maybe somewhat unexpected results. Yeah.
Thank you, because I think that this is the beauty of the framework that you guys work hard to put together. It's essentially, it's not just, oh, let's see what are based on the transportation network and the traffic patterns, what are the bottlenecks, but you integrated it with the hydrodynamic analysis. And so thank you. I think that adds a lot of insight.
Yeah, that's hope. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hope that's will be accepted by many. Yeah.
Any final questions for either of the speakers? Okay, so in that case, I want to thank Priyadarshan and Aaron again for their excellent presentations and for giving us all something to think about. And I'll ask, stay tuned for the next session on November 3rd. And if you know anyone that might be interested in presenting, there's a second slot in that time. So looking forward to seeing you all then, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.